مرحبا وأهلا بكم في برنامج داخل واشنطن. معكم مضيفكم روبرت ساتلوف. السرطان، الكلمة نفسها مخيفة. هاجم أكثر من 1.5 مليون أمريكي العام الماضي، رجال ونساء، صغار وكبار، من كل الأعراق والمجموعات الإثنية والأديان، وقتل أكثر من نصف مليون. ولكن الأمل موجود. الأبحاث تسفر عن اكتشافات مهمة تقربنا إلى الكلمة الصحيحة، الشفاء. وفيما يخص السياسة العامة، فإن مزيداً من الأمريكيين مستعدون لاتخاذ قرارات حاسمة تهدف إلى السيطرة على أنواع السرطان التي يمكن الوقاية منها والحد من الإصابة بها، ويشمل ذلك قضية الطبخ المثيرة للجدل السياسي. هذا الأسبوع في برنامج داخل واشنطن سنناقش موضوع الصحة والسياسة المتبعة فيما يخص مشكلة السرطان في أمريكا اليوم مع السيدة تملك خبرة في كلا العالمين، وهي السفيرة سالي كاول، النائبة الأولى لرئيس الجمعية الأميركية للسرطان. Welcome back to Dakhel, Washington. I'm sitting here with Sally Cole of the American Cancer Society. Sally, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Of all the terrible diseases out there, why focus so much of your life and effort on fighting cancer?
Well, it's a personal experience for me, as I think it is for many of us. My father died of cancer. My brother died of cancer. The second half of my career after my time in the Foreign Service, I've devoted to public health of one kind or another. First to infectious diseases like HIV, AIDS, malaria, tuberculosis. But first of all, the burden of disease is changing around the world. We're seeing much more of the non-communicable diseases, cancer, heart disease, diabetes. So professionally, it seemed to me that that was the more important thing to focus on. And then personally, I had experience with cancer the way I had not, in a personal way, had experience with the other diseases. So that's why I came to the American Cancer Society.
How serious is the threat of cancer in, let's just say, America today?
Well, in America, we're actually seeing some good news statistics. We've seen, of course, many new treatments come on line over the last 20 years. We've actually seen a drop in cancer statistics, about 20% less mortality than 20 years ago. So in America, the news is pretty good. That's very much in contrast to the rest of the world, where cancer is increasing quite exponentially. In fact, in low and middle income countries all over the world, they're really now facing a tsunami of cancer, with the statistics being 13 million new cases a year of cancer and about 8 million deaths, and those are going up.
And what types of cancer are so prevalent now around the world?
Well, certainly lung cancer is very prevalent around the world and is going up in most places around the world as primarily, overwhelmingly, as a result of increased use of tobacco products. So we see that on the rise, whereas it's falling in the United States. Deaths from lung cancer, incidence of lung cancer, as tobacco smoking has come down. The other rapidly growing cancer in many places around the world is breast cancer. And so we pay a lot of attention to that. And cervical cancer, another woman's cancer, remains a very big issue in low and middle income countries. In the United States, we have a 91% survival rate after 5 years for cervical cancer. But in low and middle income countries where people are diagnosed very late and there are very few treatments, it's really almost always fatal after a year or so.
Is there a theory why the number or the rate of breast cancer is rising so quickly around the world?
Yeah. Well, I don't think we know all of the factors. It's quite interesting that as countries become wealthier, breast cancer tends to go up and cervical cancer tends to go down. But one of the factors in breast cancer is obesity. We think about obesity as being a risk factor for diabetes, certainly, for heart disease, for cardiovascular problems. But it turns out that obesity is also quite a large risk factor for many kinds of cancer, including breast cancer. So the world is certainly becoming more obese, and that's one of the reasons why breast cancer is on the rise.
And when you look at the statistics for the world, are certain regions of the world doing better or doing worse with cancer in general?
Well, I mean, what we're seeing is that I mentioned these statistics of 13 million new cases of cancer every year. 60% of those cases are in what we would call developing countries or low and middle income countries. And about 70% of the deaths are in low and middle income countries. So I would say that in general, there's a greater divide now between the United States, Western Europe, Canada, Australia, and the rest of the world, where we're seeing rising rates certainly in the Middle East, in Africa, in Latin America, and in Asia.
Let's talk about kids for a second. How about cancer affecting children? First in the United States and then globally. Are there trends here that we can notice?
Well, yes. I mean, again, I'm a strong believer that where you live shouldn't determine if you live. And that's the really tragic thing with pediatric cancer, because we are now able, through early detection and good but relatively inexpensive treatments, able to save the lives of about 90% of the children who get cancer in the United States. Tragically, about 90% of the children who get cancer in Africa and in some other places of the world die from the disease for want of a few $100s in chemotherapy drugs. So the rate of pediatric cancer is not rising very, very quickly, but the rate of mortality is certainly unacceptably high.
And so what can one do, what can an organization do to demystify, to destigmatize, to use your words, this fear of even talking about the disease?
Well, I think you need to get over your fear by indeed stepping right into it and talking about it and mobilizing communities to talk about it. And by making sure that people know about 50% of cancers in the developing world are preventable. There are things you can do. You can stop smoking, for instance. You can eat better. You can get more physical exercise. You can restrict your intake of alcohol. All those things will certainly make it less likely that you will have a cancer diagnosis. Then we do a lot of community mobilization in the United States, and we're beginning to teach other countries how to do it. We have a wonderful program called Relay for Life, and it takes place in the United States in almost every little community and city and town all over this country. I think something like 5,100 communities do Relay for Life, and it started about 30 years ago from the community, and it's a fundraising thing, but it's also promoting survivorship. It's putting survivors out on a track, and it's a relay in the sense that the community gets together and all night long they walk around a track, and it's a relay because you join other members of a team and you're fundraising, but you're also passing the baton, and you're saying, just like the fight against cancer is a marathon, it's not a sprint. We do something that goes on for hours. And so now we're beginning to license this Relay for Life event, currently to 23 countries. It will be 26 by the end of the year, and one of the new countries we're very excited is coming on board as a Relay for Life partner is the United Arab Emirates, where it will begin this year. So it raises funding from the community, for needs in the community, but it also does such a good job at destigmatizing and at showing that really hope lives here. It's possible to survive cancer. If you didn't think it was possible to survive cancer, why would you ever want to know that you had it? You wouldn't.
Okay, when we come back with Sally Cole, we're going to talk about the public policy aspects of fighting cancer in just a moment. Sally G. Cole is the Senior Vice President of Global Health at the American Cancer Society. She leads the Society's efforts to reduce the global burden of cancer. Ambassador Cole has long experience both in international diplomacy and promoting international health. She helped found the joint United Nations program on HIV/AIDS in Switzerland, and she served as the U.S. ambassador to the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. In addition, she served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, and she was the CEO of the Cuba Policy Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the study of the benefits of expanding trade and contact with Cuba. She received her bachelor's degree from DePaul University in Greencastle, Indiana, and her master's degree from George Washington University here in our nation's capital. So, Sally, let's talk about the public policy aspect. So, for example, tobacco. Not all cancers are preventable, but some certainly are, and there's been a huge push in our country to limit tobacco usage. How about abroad?
Well, we've seen very good efforts abroad. About 10 years ago, we signed, or the world signed, I should say, the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. It was the only treaty that was ever brought into force through the World Health Organization. So it's really the only health treaty we have in the world. And I think it's 179 countries have ratified the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, which actually mandates them to do certain public policy things about tobacco, particularly about tobacco taxation and tobacco policy in general. And yet we see a great lag. It's not happening. It's not happening as fast as it should. When the Surgeon General's report came out in the United States, which the American Cancer Society had worked with the Surgeon General on, it was in 1964, and about 40% of the American public was smoking at that time. And if you remember the TV ads, there were doctors in white coats who told you one brand was actually better for you than another, and 40% of the public was smoking. It's now less than 20% of the public. Some countries, for instance Brazil, it's dropped to 14%. So some countries have done even better than the United States. When we come to talk about the Middle East, however, a topic of great interest to your listeners, we see that actually smoking rates have gone up more than 100% in the last 30 years. So during the time when smoking rates in the United States have fallen dramatically from 40% to less than 20%, smoking rates in the countries that compose the Eastern Mediterranean region of the WHO, including North Africa and the Middle East, those rates have gone up 109%. So we see a lot more smoking. One of the reasons is that cigarettes are, and I'll talk in a minute about water pipes and hookahs, but cigarettes have become very inexpensive compared to the income levels in many countries in the region. For example, an average salaried person in the United Arab Emirates, his income allows him to buy 6 packs of cigarettes per hour of his wages. So that means actually the least expensive place to be a smoker in the world is in the United Arab Emirates. So through a taxation policy, something could obviously be done about that.
Now, are these, to a great extent, American cigarettes being exported, or cigarettes coming from where?
Well, I think we're sort of equal opportunity. Yes, I would say the American tobacco companies have a big role in that. So does British American Tobacco and tobacco comes from many places around the world.
I mean, I know that many companies have looked for new markets when old markets have closed. Is this something that American law should begin to focus on, or is this something that we should only look toward the local culture, political system to focus on?
Well, I think it has to be both. And the American Cancer Society has taken, along with the Tobacco Free Kids organization, the American Heart Association, many others, have taken a very strong view, a strong position on tobacco and trade as an issue. As you know, we're hopefully getting some fast-track authority from the Congress, or the President is getting some fast-track authority to negotiate a new TTP, which is a trade agreement with all the nations of the Pacific Ocean. And we are trying to make sure that tobacco is not treated equally as other products are in that treaty, because we believe, and the American people believe, we've done some public opinion research on this, that we should not be exporting products which kill. There are now about 1 billion smokers in the world, 1 billion. That's 15% of the entire world population is smoking. And this is going up dramatically. As you say, when the tobacco companies lose markets in places like the United States, they look to promote their products in other countries around the world, and that's what we're seeing. So smoking rates are going up, and we know that really 2/3 of people who smoke tobacco will eventually die of it. So it's very preventable, and we need to step up our efforts at every part of this system, from the production of the tobacco itself, to the making of the product, to the labeling of the product, to the taxing of the product. It all needs to be stepped up everywhere. And I think the United States, as a producer of tobacco, has an obligation to try to export at least its knowledge about the risks of tobacco to other places around the world where they may not be aware of that.
Let me ask about how the U.S. government itself is set up to fight cancer. How would you evaluate? Are we well prepared in a governmental sense? Do we have a good infrastructure? Do we have budgets? Is there a lot of money that taxpayers give to the fight against cancer? Is it adequate? What's your assessment?
Well, my assessment is that it's pretty good, and it just didn't happen that way. It's pretty good because activists in this country fought for it to be that way. So that in 1971, President Nixon declared a war on cancer, and the National Cancer Institute was formed as one of the institutes of the National Institutes for Health. And every year since then, the National Cancer Institute has received a budget which was allocated by the Congress. I may be wrong, but I don't think so, at what each president since President Nixon has requested in each budget, or even above that. So because cancer has touched so many of us, we have had great public support for, even among people who don't want taxes to go up or who don't really approve of government spending. They usually cut out cancer from that equation and say, yes, this is something we want the government to do. As a person who's worked my entire life on international affairs, I would like to see us do a better job with cancer as part of our global health policy. We have been focused, as understandably, on HIV, AIDS, malaria, communicable diseases, and then on maternal health for the last 20, 30, 40 years. And we've seen some amazing results. But now I believe it's been skewed so that we have a $9 billion budget from the United States, mostly through USAID, but also some of it coming from Health and Human Services and the Defense Department and other parts of our government, which work with low and middle income countries on health and health policy and improving health outcomes. Of that $9 billion, less than $100 million goes toward cancer. although cancer is killing far more people than AIDS, malaria, tuberculosis together. And cervical cancer alone is killing more women than all maternal conditions around the world. So we need to get our money where the real needs are. So I think we're doing great domestically. That's partly with the efforts of the American Cancer Society, our Cancer Action Network, and many other organizations, the Susan G. Komen organization, many other cancer organizations continue to make sure that there is good congressional support for work on cancer domestically. I'd like to see us do a little bit more so that we really help other countries fight the battle that they are now facing.
Sally Cole, thank you so much for discussing this important topic on Dakhel, Washington.
Thank you very much, Robert. It's a pleasure to be here.
بهذا نصل إلى نهاية هذه الحلقة من برنامج داخل واشنطن. إذا كانت لديكم أي استفسارات أو تعليقات حول هذه الحلقة وخاصة حول المعركة ضد السرطان في بلدكم، أرجو أن تراسلوني مباشرة على عنوان البريد الإلكتروني التالي insidewashington@alhurra.com. معكم روبرت ساتلوف. شكرا لكم وإلى اللقاء.